Hello, everyone. Welcome to Homemakers Radio. I'm Mrs. Sherman. I'm broadcasting from the manse to give you something to listen to while you walk or while you work today. Just remember, this is my opinion. Don't repeat anything in your own life unless you've checked it out to see if it goes with what your family's needs are and your own beliefs. So that way, I can excuse myself if I make a few mistakes. Now, if I were conversing with you and you were sitting across the table from me, you would mentally filter out a lot of things that I said that weren't exactly how you thought, and you would not have to edit. I would not have to edit anything. I don't edit, so I just go ahead with all my flustering and say what I'd like to say, and it gives you something to listen to while you go. Before I go, though, I would like to share with you my teacup. It has a beautiful little bird on it, and it's from Stitch Called China, which is usually sold at the reject stores like Ross and TJ Maxx, Home Goods, and Marshalls, and overseas in some of these stores where you get these are new. They're not nothing wrong with them. It's just maybe they are bought from last year's stock or sold at a discount for some reason, and so I'll include a picture of that for you. Also, before I go, with the lady named Virginia, for some reason I did not get your address. I don't know why it was. I must have torn it off the package when you sent it to me at Christmas. But you gave me these delightful hand warmers, and they were supposed to be used in the microwave. I don't have a microwave, but I put them on top of my radiator heater, and they work just fine and keep my fingers warm. And I just love them, but I wanted to write to you. I have your card here, and it says Virginia in Virginia. For some reason, I did not see the address on the package. So if you will write to me or email me the address so that I can write back to you. And also, I have one other thing to share with you, is that I have letters from my descendants, and one of them is 4 years old, and he wants to write to me. So I guess it's part of his schoolwork. You know, that's an excellent way to homeschool your children, is have them write to their grandmothers, because they start to spell and write and put their heart in what they're doing. And he has drawn me a picture of a house with 2 trees on it on the side, and also drawn a keyboard. I don't know if you can see this because there's so much glare on the paper, but here's what I'm doing is I'm putting them inside of these sleeves here, these plastic sleeves. You buy a package of them, and that way they each have their own notebook with all of the things they've written to me from the time they could hold a pencil. And so I put all that in there, and then I also have one he wrote to me where he did a picture of a robin. And so I'm sharing this because I don't want to lose track of all this, and I want to keep, so all of them have a notebook with their own pages in it so that these can be read easily again. And he, if you'll notice, he put a little flag at the top here, and so when I got him on the phone, I thanked him so much for the letter. It's always nice to get a letter, isn't it? And the thing is with letters from children or descendants is there's no bad news in them, except maybe some little trauma in their own life at home or whatever, and it's better than some of the other things that you get. And so I asked him about that little flag he drew, and he said in the most pitiful voice, and you can recognize this because you've heard this before from your children and grandchildren, I'm not allowed to use real stamps. I'm not allowed to use real stamps, so I drew a stamp in the corner. So Mr. S, you know, for years we have teased him because his office is just so full of old stuff from, you know, pencils and erasers and staples and things dating back to 1952. We always talk to him like that. I mean, who knows what he's got back there, but he's very organized. He has it all in categories, and pens galore and paper of all manner. He even has the old-fashioned carbon paper, and he has duplicate paper from years ago from the spirit machines, and I don't know why he kept it, but he can find anything we need. So I went back there to his office and I said, when you get a chance, could you go to the dollar store for me? Because, you know, I don't like to go out. And could you look in this sticker section and see if you could find some flag stamps that I could send to this little boy, and so he could put real stamps on his letters. And he said, "No, I can't." And I thought, what? He was so shocking. He said, "Nope, I can't." And he went directly to an old cardboard file, and it was all nattered and torn, and he got it out, and he had collected all these flag stickers that come in the mail when you get your address labels, or from the veterans advertisements that come and everything. He just collected all the flag stamps in that, and he gave them all to me, and I sent them to him yesterday. His mother's going to have to regulate him, because I think he's probably going to peel all the stickers off at one time. Anyway, I wanted to give you that idea. It's something you can do with the things that they write to you if you don't have wait, now you can always leave things in the envelopes and go through them later on, but I prefer to have them in a book, and then when they come, they can see what they sent to me. I think they're delighted with their own work. Now, to begin with today, may I encourage you to take a turn around the room. It's so refreshing. So if you just get up and walk around the room a couple of times, it does wonderful things as a homemaker for your mind. And so it's very important to have some kind of a schedule for yourself. For instance, I just made a list of a few things that I'd like to do today, and one was preparation, which includes, getting dressed and getting my appearance ready, and the other one was prayer, and the other one was exercise, and the fourth thing that I like to do, that I don't know why this thrills me so much, is my first hot drink of the day, and I don't always use tea that has caffeine in it. Sometimes I have this special strawberry tisane that I like, and put it in a very nice cup and go outside and walk around a little bit outside the house and listen to see what I can hear, and kind of take a little turn out there. And it's just part of my routine. And when I make appointments, I tend to be early. If I just pretend these are appointments, I can get there and get them done. So I have my first serious cup of tea while I'm outside. Now, in exercise, you don't have to have any kind of formal exercise, but I found it quite valuable to find someone on the web that had free videos to watch and follow what she did, and I chose the one that I have gotten the best results from. And but without the video, what will we do when we don't have all these coaches around us and able to tune into something that we like? Well, we're going to have to learn to do it ourselves. So I was thinking, what would I do if my computer didn't work and I couldn't get any of these? And I remembered enough of it that I could do some stretches, I could reach to the ceiling, and I have a little opening to the dining room there that I can reach up and hold on to, and how I can twist or move that makes me feel better. And each movement is so good for the mind, and it is free. And I think it's so important that everyone realize that there's so much out there that we can do, and it doesn't cost us anything but effort. Of course, we'd all like to have someone to just organize our lives and tell us what to do, wouldn't we? Sometimes when we're not knowing what to do next, or feeling a little bit out of sorts. And that's one of the reasons for this, for you to listen to this today. Now, I don't think I have anything else to show you, but I wanted to start by telling you these things are the ones that I use the most: the preparation and appearance, prayer, exercise, and a serious cup of tea to kind of launch me. And some of the aspects of housework can also be, for example, I had to clean the bathtub today because we still have an old-fashioned bathtub and shower connection, and I had to clean that today. And if you're not a short person, cleaning the bathtub is very hard work, and it does take some energy and exercise. So that just became my exercise. And so I do it cheerfully because I know that this is my exercise. And so I went outside with my first serious cup of tea, and I listened to the train going by. We live real close to the tracks, and I listened to some of the interesting sounds of the birds this morning as they were getting ready for the day. And so then I mentally thought about my schedule and what I'd like to do this afternoon as I want to clean my kitchen, sew a couple of pillowcases. I've been doing that for people for their birthdays and other holidays because they're so quick and easy. I don't fuss over them too much, but I'm using up some of my larger pieces of fabric that I can't do anything else with and making pillowcases for people. So I have that listed, and then to finish one sewing project that I already had cut out. And so I have a list, and I want to make sure the kitchen is clean and the bathroom is clean. And if that can be done, then I feel kind of safe because the problem is sanitation and get the trash taken out. And one extra thing today is I want to clean the fridge. I don't know why I let it go so long. It's one of the jobs I dread the most. And if I'm careful after it's clean, to just self-clean it every time I open the door, take something out, move something, wipe something down, then I wouldn't even have to have a fridge cleaning day. So now today, because it is Resurrection Sunday, I want to talk about something that we talked in our ladies' Bible class on Thursday, because we go through the Bible and read a chapter every time the ladies come for this class, and they all take turns reading, and then we discuss it. Everybody gets to say something about the chapter that we read. We try to keep them on that subject, on that chapter, and we sift through it and find inspiration from it. But before class, I have started to do something a bit different. I miss homeschooling, and I decided I'm just going to homeschool them a little bit, just for my own sanity too. And so I started out with Bible herbs, and we discussed several Bible herbs. And so last time it was hyssop, and hyssop, I have grown that in my garden. And it tastes a little bit like licorice. In fact, it was used to make licorice years ago. Now I think they just use kind of a flavoring, artificial. And also you can grow this brand called anise hyssop, which is a spice that you use in cookies. Anise cookies, have you ever heard of it? But then hyssop was used to dip into, was it gall or sour wine that was given to Christ when he was on the cross, and hyssop was used, a branch of hyssop was used to dip into this liquid that they tried to give him. And so I wanted to discuss the attributes of it. It represented purity. And the reason I know that is because David said, "Purge me with hyssop," and it was like a detox thing that you would maybe make a tea of, or something to as a liver cleanse or any other kind of cleanse. So if you want to look up hyssop, or I'll give you a link to it, and you can study that a little bit as one of the things that we learn from the cross and from the crucifixion. And so today I want to recognize that hyssop represented cleansing. And so we see that Christ died on the cross, and as a result of his resurrection, we have an opportunity to be cleansed from our sins. And so this goes a lot deeper than that, and I can give you links to look that up, because you're probably all going to get a resurrection sermon today, and I sure don't need to go any further with that. So the cost of fuel today means that many of us are going to spend more time at home, so it's most important to make it as pleasant as we can. And the easiest way, of course, is to clean it and make it orderly. And children love order. They like things stacked. They like the towels stacked neatly and uniformly, and they like their clothes folded and their things put away properly. They feel better because of it. And I noticed when my children were growing up, anytime there was any kind of fussiness, I had fallen down on the organization and the cleanliness. We all felt a little bit upset because life wasn't predictable when you don't have everything in order. So you try to get things in order because we'll make the house the way we want it. And of course, the second way is to add beautiful touches. And I found that I needed that extra. Now, some people don't. they're happy just to clean it and leave it as it is. But they don't need that extra touch. And if you'll notice behind me, I've gotten some new cushions for that old couch, and it adds to the comfort and also to the visual beauty of the place, which does feel welcome. And so I wanted to also, while I was putting those cushions on there, to help you to understand what we used to want in the olden days. What was it we wanted when we were 16 or 17 and we were dreaming of our new home, or even younger, and thinking of what we would like? These are some of the things that were important to us. Now, I've heard that today no one wants this stuff, but if you ever want to explore what was important to people, go to the antique stores and see some of these things. And I'm happy to say that they are in the kind of popular decorating trend now called cottagecore, which is just really going back to some of the stuff we did. And so what we wanted, I explained last time in my last video how important curtains were to us. We wanted either the Priscilla curtains or a little calico curtain made out of a flour sack. These were important to us. They added a beautiful touch and made you feel, I think in putting curtains up, we were saying, this is my place. And it was a statement of establishment. And so what we want, we also was really important to us were our dishes and glassware. How carefully those patterns were chosen, the picture on the plate. Everything had a meaning because we knew we'd be looking at it a long time, but also the dishes and the silverware were important because it represented your family. Often it would have their signature or the initial of their family's last name or first name on the products, on the silverware especially, or the glassware might have their initial on it. And I've forgotten what that was called. But also on the pillowcases and the towels. These were important to them. It was their own establishment. It was their own private hotel. Had all these... had all the embroidery on it, and these were important to us. I've seen, though, over the years how people have just kind of shrugged it off, and those things are not important to them anymore. Also, they thought, I heard this when I was growing up, and you probably did too, if you have good silverware and good dishes, your marriage will last a lot longer. And I'm not sure that was true, but I think that they thought that it was such an investment that you didn't want to give it up. And then if they put their initials on the towels and on the pillowcases, you sure didn't want to. What were you going to do with that stuff? So it might have had something to do with it. I don't know, but they would say that. I'm not sure. Also, we wanted good floor mats. Braided floor mats were the thing, or a hand-hooked rug. And those were important. Those things were important to us, as well as a good set of cooking pots and pans. Really good set. And because we would be eating at home. And also our furniture, not so much, although, we wanted a good, comfortable chair or place to sit. I couldn't get excited about what we had when I was growing up, but my father, in those days, everybody had an old car, and they would take parts out of that car and put it in another car, and they would use everything out of these cars. And he had taken, and in those days, there was no such thing as the separate bucket seats. They were just a long kind of a couch in the back seat and the front seat. And he had taken those out of an old car and created a couch for us in our log house. In fact, I believe there's a picture of it in my book, Just Breathing the Air. If you want that book, write to me and I'll figure out how you can get it. And it showed us outside sitting on, he'd pulled it outside for summer furniture and we'd sat on it. And we just thought that was such a luxury. And so I wanted to also talk a little bit about what to do if you get in a situation in a church or in a community. And I've read lots of stories about women that got stuck out in places that were rather remote, and there was no society for them or anything, and how they coped with it and what they did and how they used their talents. Is that if you cannot, and sometimes you get in a place where there are lots of people, but they're just not interested in socializing, and they're not interested in fellowship. They're not interested in coming to your house or developing any kind of friendship or social relationship at all. And what to do if you've tried and maybe even in a little church that you're in, they're not responding, and they're not that interested. One thing I discovered as a preacher's wife of 50 years is that during the years when we moved around a little bit more, I'd get in a place where I'd think, oh, this is so nice, and I will have friends. But what happens is you move into a place where the church is pretty well established, and these people have grown up together. They've got their parents, they've got their sisters and brothers, and they really don't need someone new, and they've already established their social life. And even at church, everything is taken care of. So sometimes the preacher's wife kind of got left out. So what I decided to do was develop my interests. So I got interested in sewing, and I got interested and I would take classes before the children came along. I would take classes in home interior, or take a class in painting or something like that, so that I would have something to show for my life, for where I'd been. And also, I wish years later in the the early 2000s, there's a new sort of trend going on how to make these journals, your art journal, or just a mini journal, or just a daily journal, and how to make them beautiful. And I wished I had known more about that, but in those days there wasn't anything very pretty to write on. And so I sewed cushions, little cushions, different styles, and there were these little books you could get that would show you different things to do to make it unique. And women didn't have matching cushions in their houses. They had homemade crocheted or embroidered cushions in their house. Everything was unique because it was all handmade, nothing manufactured, and no two were alike. I wish I had taken a picture of my mother-in-law's old couch where she had it all lined with cushions that people had given her, round and square and oblong, and some of them were different kinds of needlework, not just embroidery. And so that's what I did, and I have a little collection of cushions from back then when I was trying to do something during the time when people were not that interested in anything like having a Bible study, ladies' Bible study, or tea time, or anything like that. And the other thing you can do is go ahead and do it for yourself, because you start to increase your skills. Go ahead, sit down, have a Bible study, pretend to conduct it, have a tea party, and get dressed for it, and go ahead and do it. That way, you can develop your skills. So it's very important, if you're a homemaker and if you have a church to go to don't entirely depend on your emotional, social life on the church, because they're just people, and it can let you down, it can disappoint you, because it will never be completely what you want it to be. So you have to make life at home what you want it to be. And this is where I think homeschooling helps, because you've got your family around you, and they can help give you ideas and suggestions of what they would like to do. And sometimes I would listen to my children talk about places they would like to go, and we would organize something at home where we would explore in history books and in geography books things about these places, or even the history of one of the towns nearby, and maybe eat the food or dress the costume or something like that. And I would like to repeat something I read in Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. I can never find enough Jane Austen to listen to while I walk, but today I'm going to read a little bit out of one of the books. And his suggestion was that we get a reminder on our phones from Miss Bingley, who said, "May I encourage you to take another turn about the room? It's so refreshing." So if you could get somebody to call you up and tell you that, or to text that to you, then that would get you up. And I think we need to do more walking around, standing up, and less sitting. And I think the more we sit, the longer we sit, that sometimes that's why people get depressed. We talk a lot about postpartum depression, and everybody tries to treat it with chemicals and stuff. Well, a lot of it's just because you've been laying for a long time, or sitting for a long time. You'll be nursing. It's a long time to be sitting, and so it's very important to vary your sitting and standing with your with laying around. And be careful, because I have noticed, if something is starting to challenge me and I'm getting a little bit perturbed by it, if I will get up, it helps. And if I'll stretch, it helps. It does change the mind considerably. I would also like to today encourage you in your prayer time to pray for every single member of your family. When you think about it, I've said this before, there's probably no one else praying for them. Do you know anyone who prays for your husband or your children? Pray for yourself, your husband, your children, all of your brothers and sisters and relatives. Because do you ever wonder, you think sometimes church prayers are going to cover this. We pray for all of our members, but by name, sometimes that's not possible in a church. So it's important for you in your private prayers to pray for every member of your family. Sometimes we can get interested in what the media is talking about, and so we're just praying like crazy for all the leaders and all the countries, and when the most important thing, of course, is our own families and our own homes. This is what makes the world stable, is your home and your family. This is part of what makes life meaningful and fulfilling. And of course, we want our governments to behave themselves and to get under God, because it gives us peace in our lives. And the Bible does say to pray for them that you might live a peaceful life. So we do want to pray for them, that they'll stay out of our lives and give us peace. But remember to pray for every single member of your family, and pray for the things that God would see their need and take care of them. Now, lastly, today, I want to talk to you about the home and homemaking, and to discuss the fact that if the home and the dwelling place is the most important thing, and make sure the children can help, because they always feel so much better if they're contributing in some way to the well-being of the home and of the family, if they feel like this is their home. And I have heard people constantly tell their children, well, when you grow up and leave home. Well, that's a very daunting thing for a child, because this is their home. And when you're little, you don't want to grow up and leave home. You want to be home. And so I've just like to encourage you to allow them to participate in the home and participate in making it worthwhile living in, and that this is their home too. And you all know when your children are old enough to start pulling themselves up, and they pull themselves up on the edge of the couch or the coffee table or somewhere, and they feel like that is theirs. And I always sensed that, that they had made this their home. Now, also, I wanted to read a little bit of Emma to you today, because Jane Austen created her for no one to like. Unfortunately, we all liked her anyway, in spite of her ways, her persnickety ways. And she wrote in some of her letters and diaries and whatever I've read, that she really, or her speaking to her publisher, she did not want Emma to be liked. She wanted, and I'm sure she met her, a facsimile of her somewhere, because every generation has them, and everyone has the person in their life that is constantly correcting everybody or trying to run their lives. And Unfortunately, she's made to be such a lovable character that we don't actually hate her for it. But I wanted to read something that she did because it will bring me to things that happen to us as homemakers when we're dealing with other people, maybe even our own families. Some people want to create trouble wherever they are, and maybe they don't even know they're doing it or think of it as trouble. They just want they don't want to be dull, and they don't want to be thought of as uninteresting. So when someone says something, they object to it or they contradict it because they think this is how you stimulate a conversation. And it didn't occur to me that this was what it was. Years ago, I thought they were just being rude, but some people really don't think that they've never been shown this. That's why I think sometimes refinement classes and manners classes are good for both young men and young women, so that they don't correct every single thing that people say and make it uncomfortable for them in the conversation or in the group. And I was talking to a lady recently who works with, she works as a caregiver, and she says sometimes she has to tell the person that they have to be really careful to make the atmosphere nice for other people and not to create a hostile atmosphere by constant arguing. And she has to teach them to, quote, self-regulate. And she says, if you can't regulate yourself, then I will help you. And she'd give them a code word like, well, anyway, or that reminds me. And she'd have these little phrases which would mean you've talked too much. And one of the things that she tells them is be respectful and honoring of other people. Be quiet. Don't correct people. Just be quiet and be kind. And she said, if you hear anything that someone says that isn't quite accurate or quite perfect, just be quiet. And in the group, and you can take them aside and talk to them privately. And of course, we all know how uncomfortable that is when we're asked a question and we start to answer it in any kind of conversation and someone starts to correct us. And so I want to read part of Emma because she was doing this. And so this is a problem that has always existed. And I think that's why the Bible says, be courteous one to another. And so this was the situation where Mrs. Elton had gotten married, and Emma was a little bit miffed because she had tried to match Harriet up to Mr. Elton and thought Harriet would have been so much better. So Mrs. Elton comes to visit, and she keeps talking about how this new place that she lives in now that she's married to Mr. Elton, the minister, is so much like Maple Grove. And she says the staircase, as I came in, I observed how very like the staircase was in her previous home, placed exactly in the same part of the house. I really could not help exclaiming, I assure you, Miss Woodhouse, it is very delightful to me to be reminded of a place I am so extremely partial to as Maple Grove. I have spent so many happy months there, with a little sigh of sentiment. A charming place, undoubtedly. Everybody who sees it is struck by its beauty, but to me it has been quite a home. Wherever you are transplanted, like me, Miss Woodhouse, you will understand how very delightful it is to meet with anything at all like one has left behind. I always say this is quite one of the... Let me just go to the next page here, next chapter, and see what she says. One of the advantages. Emma made as slight a reply as she could, but was fully sufficient for Mrs. Elton, who only wanted to be talking. She didn't really care what the response was. Do you know, I think they both were at fault, but do you know anyone who doesn't really care whether anyone's interacting with them or not? They're going to keep talking and tell their story, and they're just delighted with it, but they don't care what anyone says, or even if anyone walks away, they'll just sit there and finish the story. So extremely like Maple Grove, and it is not merely the house, The grounds, I assure you, as far as I could observe, are strikingly like the laurels of Maple Grove, in the same profusion as here, and stand very much in the same way just across the lawn. And I had a glimpse of a fine large tree with a bench around it, which put me uh, so which put me so exactly in mind. My brother and sister will be enchanted with this place. People who have extensive grounds themselves are always pleased with anything in the same style. Emma doubted the truth of this statement. Now here's where she has a problem, is that she's thinking of things to object to, and in a minute I'll tell you maybe a pretend real life scenario where this might happen, where you can solve a problem by not letting out too much information. Emma doubted the truth of this sentiment. She had a great idea that people who had extensive grounds themselves cared nothing for the extensive grounds of anyone else. But it was not worth while to attack an error so double-dyed, and therefore only said in reply, "When you have seen more of this country, I'm afraid you will think you have overrated Hartfield. Surrey is full of beauties." "Oh yes, I'm quite aware of that. It is the Garden of England, you know. Surrey is the Garden of England." And that's what Mrs. Elton said. So Emma said, in the book, it doesn't distinguish who said what. I know in later times we had to say, authors had to say, she said, he said, or, Mrs. Elton said. "Yes, but we must not rest our claims on that distinction. Many counties, I believe, are called the Garden of England, as well as Surrey." That was Emma's reply. "No, I fancy not," replied Mrs. Elton with most satisfied smile. "I never heard any county but Surrey called so." So then Mrs. Elton changes the subject, and she says, "My brother and sister have promised us a visit in the spring, and while they are with us, we will explore a great deal." And she kind of changes the subject, but here's the mistake that Emma made. She wanted to make conversation, so she contradicted Mrs. Elton, and she says, "Well, I never heard Surrey called the Garden of England. There's many counties called the Garden of England." And she really needed to keep her mouth shut and say instead, "I'm so happy that you're feeling at home here and that things are alike from where you previously came." But I think Jane wanted to show that this girl was so contradictory and objectionable. And so here is a sample of something you might run across, is that when you're with someone, and it might even be someone in your family, and you can teach children, but you can't always teach adults. So there has to be a way to keep from getting into these sticky messes conversationally. And so I'll give you an example here. I'll just made up a story here. And let's say that I knew someone who had been in the hospital and come out of the hospital and was telling, she lived next door to me at one time, and she was telling us when she got home how blessed she felt because she was learning to walk again, and how what a blessing that was. She hadn't thought about it before, but just to get out of bed, to bathe and get dressed was such an accomplishment for her. She felt like she had really accomplished something, that she had graduated every time she achieved a new skill after overcoming this illness that she had been through. And so then let's pretend that I was telling it to someone, and that someone decided to say some objectionable things and kind of destroy my story before I got started. And let's say I am going to say, "Do you remember this lady that used to live next to me?" And the person said, "Oh no, she never lived next to you. Because I can remember when she lived over on 5th Street or something." Well, of course, it was true. She did live over there. So my mistake would be to say, "Oh yes, she did live over there, but when she lived next door to me." "Oh no, she never lived next door to you." Okay, so what my point was, I was going to get to this wonderful statement she had made about how much she appreciated recovering and being able to walk and to breathe the air and to get dressed, and just what a delight a life was, these little things. But I never could get to the story, let's say, because the person I'm telling it to starts to correct every little stage. So I said, well, anyway, it doesn't matter where she lived, but she had had a stroke. And the person says to me, oh no, she didn't have a stroke. I was there and she just tripped on a step. And the ambulance had to come and get her. And I said, well, when she got home, she said she had had a stroke. And I went to see her. And my husband went to see her too, to pray for her. And so this person gets in an argument with me about it not being a stroke. Well, see, there's my mistake. I'll tell you where the mistakes were, that if this thing had happened, I gave too much information. I said the woman lived next door to me. Now, you can be normal with most people, but if you've got somebody who's always grabbing onto something and running off with it in a conversation and objecting to it, you're going to have to limit the knowledge that you give her. And you can't be a woman of information for some of these people. So where I made my mistake, I said the woman that used to live next door to me. I should have just said a friend of mine, because then that person can't identify this woman or where she lived. A friend of mine, and I won't say where she lived. I won't say she lived next door. Someone I once knew, because that's private and that person doesn't know who I'm talking about. Someone I once knew who had had a stroke told me what an accomplishment she felt recovering and being able to walk again and being able to dress herself. And I was trying to, let's say I was just trying to teach a lesson on these little things in life that we need to pay attention to and have delight over. And that way, if I didn't give her any information about who, first of all, who it was and where she lived, then the person couldn't grab onto it. So let's limit the amount of things that we tell people so that they don't get off. Anticipate some of these people that you wrestle with that you feel timid around because they're always correcting you. Anticipate that and don't give them too much information. And learn to say, yes or no. And don't be uncomfortable with the silence. Don't try to fill in the spaces with more information because you want to be more friendly or you want to make them feel more comfortable. If this is a person maybe in your life, maybe in a social situation that you're in or that you have to see for some reason. Now, some people will say, oh, just get away from those people. Just get them out of your life. Sometimes you can't. And as Christians, we don't want to behave like that. We do want to help them and we want to build one another up. But for some people that you deal with, if they're causing you to be aggravated, to lose your temper, to speak more firmly with them than you want to embarrass yourself, and they are causing you maybe after you've been in contact with them not to be able to breathe easy, not to be able to concentrate on anything, and you can't not see them, then give them less information. And these people also might pester you for information. They might say, now where did this woman live? Who was she? What was her name? Just say, oh, it's no one you know. Well, I don't, and I've heard this before too. Well, I might, it's no one you know. And just say, well, I'm not at liberty to say anything. I don't want to talk about her. I don't want to get any personal information. Everyone understands that, don't they? I don't want to give personal information about someone without her permission. I just wanted to use this as an example of the delight that she felt in being able to accomplish something simple like this. And so some people just will not ever learn or be taught, and you might have to accept that, so you give them less information. I remember going as a young woman, before I was married, with someone in the church who wanted to visit a lady who was homebound, and we called them, what did we call them? Shut-ins. And the women of the church would regularly choose somebody to go and take something that they'd collected for her, maybe a food basket or just something else, and go and see her. And so I got invited to go with the lady that was that week. And so she said, now when you go in here, she says, don't ask her certain questions. And I never understood that. But if you did ask her how she was feeling, for example, you would be sitting there a long time while she told you all about her bodily functions, and just every sickening detail. And so when she went in, she said, "You're looking well," and she wouldn't ask her questions. They would stay. This woman was quite skilled, and they would stay on things that would build each other up. That is a skill, I have to tell you. And find myself drawn into things when thinking, oh dear, how did I get here? How did the argument start? Let me tell you something. There are some people that are so fond of hasty, sharp replies. They will say something right quickly like, no, it's not, which is argumentative. When you see children talking like this, remember, that's argumentative. If you say, no, it's not, someone else is going to say, yes, it is. And pretty soon they're screaming at each other. But no, it's not is also a way, or not all the time, or some of these hasty, sharp replies where they hardly think about what's being said are ways that arguments begin. And so some people too, especially if they're older, now you can understand it in children, and that can be corrected, but with older people, even children can be told that that's not how we love one another, build one another up, and we want to have love. And this, to say something, a hasty, sharp reply that is contradictory or kind of pushing the other person's anger, is not courteous and not loving. But when you get older people who want to create a scene or a drama out of everything, so that they can create a war, because that's how life is interesting to them. Sometimes they're not mean people, they just don't know better, and they don't know how to have a conversation. And it's like the woman that I spoke to the other day, who was she was a caregiver, and she said, I always have to teach them, the people that she's in care of, and she works for some kind of Christian organization, and she says, I have to teach them to be kind, to be loving, and to be uplifting. And she asked somebody who had been there for a while, and there had been a previous caregiver, and she said, I noticed in the report that your previous caregiver said that you argued with her a lot. Why did you argue with her and you don't argue with me? And the lady said, because you don't let me get away with it. So sometimes I think that we're so timid and so polite that we let them get away with it. But you don't have to reprimand people if you'll just limit the information you give them, and be very careful. And also, before you go out socially, before you anticipate being with someone socially or talking to someone, even in your own family, try to role play in your mind where the conversation will go if you say a certain thing, and then refine your speech to limit and take away some of the information so they won't go there. Okay? So just practice it. And so here is, I'm going to leave you with a wonderful poem about a little road. And one of the most enjoyable things that I do when I have limited my painting now. I don't do paintings on canvas so much anymore, because, you get 20 little canvases. What are you going to do with them? You run out of space on the wall. And so what I've been doing is, when I write letters to my grandchildren and my children, I just paint the side of the letter, or I'll paint something on a piece of paper and enclose it. And that way it's smaller. And my granddaughter has a journal. She has a painting journal, and it's just beautiful. She takes a regular class every week with a friend of ours, and always sends me a picture of it. And so it's all kept in this little place here instead of all the canvases. But one of the things that I always liked doing when I'm doodling on a letter is making a road or making a path. And I enjoyed reading one of the books about the Jane Austen garden, and it was about how everything was made into things that were paths. Like, if, for instance, if I had to go to the mailbox, or I had to go over here to the little garden shed or the tool shed, those would be paths that were that had stone pavers in them, and then they had flowers on the side of the paths. But of course, I'm not able to look after all that, and but I always like to draw them on letters, a little path that goes and disappears in the horizon. And so I've ran across in this Ideals, I told you about these Ideals books. These were printed in Tennessee. I don't know if you can still get them. Every now and then I see one and I pick it up. This one is fairly new, probably from the 1990s. And so I was going to read The Traveler's Diary and also A Little Road. So I'm going to read A Little Road. And it's just ordinary citizens that would send in poems for these magazines. Some people like the highways where they can travel fast. I'll take the country byways edged with flower and grass. I'm not so fond of roads that are built by engineering skill. Give me the little gravel road that winds around a hill. I like the road from whence I see trees towering towards the sky, some cattle lying in a shade, a rippling stream nearby. I like to gaze across the fields that wave with growing grain. I like to see the gardens green and fresh from summer rain. I like to see vine-covered homes where hollyhocks are bright, where nature's partners, tired from toil, find peace and rest at night. I'm tired of traveling concrete roads. Although they're smooth and wide, I'll take a narrow country road with trees along each side. And now I'm going to read Traveler's Diary. What I like also about these books is they had wonderful old artwork in it and sketches, and I remember ladies back in the old days in the 1950s loved to have these on their coffee table because when they took their breaks from washing dishes or cooking or working in the garden, they'd come in and look at one of these books, and it was such a delight. And they had lots of recipes in here too. So I think I'll read a different one here. Okay, so this is about a mailbox. I don't know if some of you still have mailboxes, but we do. And I walk down the road to get the mail or put mail in it. And when I put mail in it to go to the post office, I put the flag up, and that way the post person that comes by knows there's mail in it to get before he just shoves everything in there. And so this is about a mailbox, and I love to see how people decorate their mailboxes or build their mailboxes. I've taken pictures sometimes when I drive into neighborhoods of interesting mailboxes that look like little houses or something else, and I'm afraid I didn't do so well with mine. It's just a plain mailbox. I hurried quickly down the road in hopes I might find waiting there behind my lonesome mailbox door a letter bringing words of care. From some loved relative or friend who, distanced from me by the miles, would visit me through written word to warm my heart and bring me smiles. Sometimes on scented paper fine, adorned with blossoms edged in gold, penned in the author's own sweet style in ink which stood out dark and bold. Received with no less joy, of course, on yellowed sheets of tablet lined, a childish scrawl across the page I'd open up that door to find. I'd read each sentence carefully. I'd laugh out loud or shed a tear to learn of how my loved ones fared and share the thoughts of one so dear. Inside a pocket I would tuck my prized possessions safe away, with each page ready to unfold and read again throughout the day. You know, I was very young when I realized the power of the mail. And when I found out you could send a letter to my grandmother, I wrote prolifically long letters and sent them. And my own granddaughter is the same way. I have boxes and boxes of letters from the very time she learned to write. 4 or 5 years old. I have stuff even when she lived here. When they lived here with me for a little while, their family stayed a little while here. she would send me letters while we were here. While I was still asleep in my room, I'd get a letter. And so I saved all those. I have boxes of these things. And that's why I decided to start putting them in these plastic sleeves so I could, leaf through them carefully. But she still realizes, as most of my grandchildren still realize, the strength and power of a letter, and use the medium. So ladies, I hope this has been valuable to you, in that you got a few things done while you listened. I might be able to read one more thing to you. It's spring here, and I know some of you are going to be going into autumn. And although I have recommended you get Victoria Magazine and Tea Time Magazine from Hoffman Media, you can subscribe to those online. They are for the Northern Hemisphere, because they are the seasons. They are the same seasons. So I don't know if it would do you much good if you're in the Southern Hemisphere getting a spring issue, but I do really recommend it. So I'm going to read you. Do you remember these? Do you remember these old pictures or paintings? It doesn't say who the artist was, but I had several of them when I was really young. The little things. We had talked about the little things earlier in this broadcast, so I want to read this poem. Lord, teach me to be thankful for the little things in life, the little joys we oft o'erlook amid the daily strife. The first sweet rose in early June, face washed with morning dew, the laughter of a little child that warms the heart of you. Lord, in the rush of daily chores, bid me to pause a while, to linger in the sunshine of a neighbor's friendly smile, and let me not be so involved that I would fail to see a robin teach her young to fly and miss such ecstasy. Sometimes a gift of joy is in a little helpful deed, or kindly word that sometimes someone offers in our time of need. Teach me, O Lord, to live each day above my meager self, ever thankful for the little things, more precious than all wealth. And this reminds me of my morning walk, because I would just encourage you all to do this, just to step outside, step away for a few minutes, and let the morning dewy air get on your skin. That's your best beauty treatment. After I've washed my face in the morning, I go out there and get that air. And sometimes I live in a very misty climate. Sometimes I get a little mist on it, and I feel like I've been sprayed with some kind of cosmetic spray. And then the other thing, when I was reading to you about letters, do you remember the little stationery boxes we used to get that had little drawers in it for the envelopes, and then a drawer for the paper? I just wish they'd bring those back. Those were just the nicest things. And then we'd save the empty boxes, put other things in it, put our pens and pencils and paper clips in it, or other items. And I really wish that they would bring those back. Or I think a lot of the crafters now are learning to make them, which is really nice. And so I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming and for allowing me in your home. And God bless you and your families and all your children. Those of you who live alone, I hope this has given you some company, and hope you'll get up today and take a turn around the room. Have yourself a very significant cup of tea, and a serious cup of tea is what I called it, no matter what it is, and that you can be your creative self or tap into some creativity. And I will see you next time. Bye.